Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are at episode 4. I am your host, Jason Abbott. I am joined this week by my co-host, first-timer, Jeff Schlaff.
Hey.
He is in environmental responsibility with his career. He's a father. He also has some children with allergies, which we're going to be touching on today. And
you married my cousin?
And I married your cousin. Yeah, we'll get that out there right now. So he's a metalhead at heart. He's got Megadeth that basically runs through his veins. And he is a beer connoisseur, an aficionado, however you may say. Our guest today is Jessica Hudson. She is the owner-operator of Sweet Peas Farm. It is a farm based out of the Metro Lansing, Michigan area. And they recently relocated for reasons of food allergies for their children and nutritional values that they needed to fill a void from the stores and general processed foods that are out there available for us. So she has been featured on several local news stations and another podcast in the area. And she's in a battle right now with Williamson Township on some zoning violations because of her operations that she has out there. So welcome, Jessica. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Why don't you, I'll go ahead and give you kind of the floor here. I want you to just kind of go ahead and explain to us what you've been dealing with and, why you decided to move out to the country from the city area. And why don't you give us a little background on you?
Okay. Well, the background on this story is my children, I have 5 children between the ages of 2 and 11, and they have multiple food allergies and environmental allergies, of course. And we just aren't able to eat pretty much anything out of a box or a bag. There is no healthy processed food for us, nothing that is safe. And so in the process of trying to find safe local foods that are also affordable, we discovered that it's just almost impossible for us because of the nature of our food allergies, and that we were going to have to end up raising the animals ourselves and growing the food ourselves. So we started looking for a house in the country, something where we could have animals that we wanted, and we found the house that we really liked, and I called the township to verify that everything that we wanted to do there was going to be allowed, and they said yes. So we bought the house, we moved in, we got
Super excited, right?
Oh, yes, very much. The kids had been looking forward to it for over a year already, and it was just our dream, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got a few pigs, got some chickens, got some goats, and I think we'd been there for 3 or 4 months when we got the letter from the township that we were in violation of ordinances.
Now, when you got this violation notice, was there like a neighbor that had complained or a township just local roll by, or do you even know how that got brought to the table?
Actually, we don't know at this point. I have submitted a Freedom of Information Act request with the township asking for any information about the complaints, who made them, what the nature of the complaints were. And at this point, they have evaded the question. They assert that they don't need a
catalyst.
Right. They don't need any kind of complaint to enforce zoning violations. So they're not answering my question. They're just throwing riddles at me, and so our attorney is taking it over from this point. But when I first went in and talked to them, I was told by a person behind the counter that, yes, they had had a complaint, and we don't know who it was made by or what the nature of the complaint was.
So that's got to feel good. You kind of, now you're almost watching your back and looking over your shoulder all the time.
Correct.
Especially with this issue on the table already.
Right. We are very careful to mind our P's and Q's and keep everything in order, make it neat and presentable to anyone that might show up at any time, not only because we're getting so much press coverage, but because we want to just be mindful of our neighbors and mindful of people who are viewing us from the outside.
How are your relationships with your closest neighbors?
Well, actually, the day that we moved in, I took cookies to our next door neighbor that's on the north side of us. There's no neighbor. It's just woods. And across the street from us, there's no neighbor. It's a 40-acre farm that does crops. And so the only neighbor that we have is directly to the south of us. And so I took cookies to them and I explained to them, who we are and what we're doing here and how our kids have allergies and how we wanted to raise animals. So I explained all of this to them. And I asked them if they ever had a problem to please come and talk to us about it, because we want to be good neighbors. We want to work anything out that there might be a problem.
Now, I'm sorry to cut you off here,
Go
but
ahead.
how far away is this neighbor to the south of you?
They are very close. They're within sight distance, probably maybe an acre and a half away from our house.
Okay.
So they are the only ones, though, that are actually
Within sight distance?
sight.
Okay.
Yes. That could hear anything on our property, see anything on our property, anything like that.
Now, are you confident in the quality of these cookies?
Fairly so. I mean, they were allergen free, so my standards have changed quite a bit from other people's standards, probably.
That's why I was asking.
The nutritional value is probably much higher,
Much.
I would imagine.
Not many people's focus on a cookie.
Right. And so we had good relations with them at that point. We spoke with the wife often. She would come over and gave the kids some scarecrows around Halloween. I made pumpkin bread for them, and we shared eggs with them. So we were on good speaking terms. We were very neighborly with them. But at some point in October, they put their house on the market. And so we think that probably they were the ones who complained because they were not selling their house. That's our speculation at this point, but we don't know anything.
Okay. Are you still on good terms with them at this point?
We actually haven't spoken to them since Christmas.
Okay.
A lot of our speaking to them involved being outside in the yard and seeing them in their yard saying hi, and that struck up a conversation.
Wintertime.
Right. In wintertime, you're not really getting outside.
Well, you guys probably are.
Yes, we do spend a little time outside, but
Right.
it doesn't really take that long to take care of animals. So
Okay.
the number we have anyway.
Can you take us through like a daily chores list that you, your husband, and your kids go through on caring for the
Actually,
animals and the food?
I haven't said this anywhere before, but my husband and I made an agreement when we moved that we could have the animals. My son and I could have the animals as long as he never had to do anything with them.
So he gets the benefit of the country without having to do
That's
the work.
right.
Okay.
He does help. He's helped us haul hay and, some of the heavier things that an 11-year-old boy and a woman aren't going to do so well all on our own, but he is mostly hands off.
So he doesn't want to shovel the pig shit.
Right,
Gotcha.
exactly.
So he has a day job?
Yes, he does. He works full-time and goes to school full-time, so he's really not around a whole lot to help anyway. So
Gotcha. Now, part of this story, from what I was reading on your website, it basically said when you initially went to dispute something, there was talk about your kids were 4-H.
yes.
So that had a special not a restriction, but a special allowance to be doing what you're doing. So what exactly is 4-H? I've seen those signs everywhere up north, and I did some research on it this week, but it seems like it's a heartfelt organization that is determined to do good.
Yes.
And very educational things in the process.
Yes, 4-H is it's kind of a malleable thing. So, like our group, for instance, it's your local group. Anyone can start a group, and our group is in the Weberville group. It has parents and community members who volunteer to teach the kids things and do projects with them that they then enter in the fair at the end of the summer. So our children do poultry, and they did candle making this year, and a couple of other things. They're doing shooting sports, so archery and BB guns. And there are parents who have children around our age or above, and they teach them these things, and they do practicing, and to the point where they can compete in it.
So they don't really teach them about how to monocrop?
No.
I'm assuming that monocrop is kind of out of the picture in that
Correct.
one, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
it's more of a traditional farming values kind of thing.
Okay.
Now, I was really confused by that term because crop rotation seems to be the no-brain. It has all the benefits, so I'm not sure.
Sure does.
I don't understand monocropping.
Well, I think the benefit, and we'll touch on this here. I wanted to touch on Monsanto and other multinational giants, and us moving from an agricultural environment to an industrial food sourcing which is causing, possibly a lot of allergies, a lot of asthma-related issues, a lot of different health concerns, ranging from diabetes to heart disease.
Inflammation.
You were talking about when you were in the market, you couldn't go and eat anything in the store. What I've heard, this is going back a couple years ago, but somebody told me to just go on the outside of the supermarket and do not hit the shelves in between, because everything on those shelves is heavily processed.
Exactly.
So anything that you're not keeping cool, or fruits that won't stay, or vegetables or things like that, milk, cheese, the meats, those are all kind of on the outer ring. But once you get into the shelves, you're looking at Boo Berry and Count Chocula and Cheez-Its and Wheat Thins, and we can go on for days about how processed things are.
Yes, processed foods are created for shelf stability. They really are created to last a lifetime, and that is not good for people. It's just not good. There's no way that processed foods are anything nutritious at all. It doesn't matter how many synthetic vitamins you add. It doesn't matter how healthy you say it is. It's just not.
Well, just for an example, I was watching a couple documentaries this week on this and doing some reading. And let's talk about white bread for a minute.
Bleach flour.
You're smirking over there. So yeah, it's basically, they take the wheat and they mill it, they call. And what that does, it takes the germ and the husk off, and you're left with just
all the
basically
vitamins.
all the vitamins.
It takes all the vitamins
it takes all the vitamins off. So you're left with this husk of nothingness, basically, just with powder after they demolish it. Then they bleach it with chemicals that I really can't even pronounce or recall at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they enrich and remove all the vitamins, when they strip this through this process of heating and adding chemicals or whatnot, then they throw vitamins back in it. Like, oh, here's a dash of vitamin A, or here's some thiamine, or niacin. I was looking at the breads in my house. I always prefer to eat the whole grain. It's more expensive. The kids like white bread, so what we do is we've been doing, the whole grain white. So I think it's probably a little bit better, but not much.
It's not much.
Not much, no. But when you look at the ingredients, it's just amazing. With the emulsifiers and all these different things. Like, why can't we just eat food? Why does it have to be imitation food? Because you're not pulling this out of the ground. And I understand you grow wheat, you are going to have to crush it down to make bread with yeast. And, there's ways to make food. But it seems like as we go on, with all these gigantic food corporations, Coca-Cola, Burger King, McDonald's, everything that has got this, who grabs kids really early in life and almost gives them a food addiction, to this unhealthy stuff. Where's the solution with that?
It's absolutely created to cause an addiction. There's no doubt about it.
There's a lot of money in addiction, right?
Oh, yes. And the more addicted they get you to the food, the more you eat it, the sicker you get, the more you need the pharmaceutical industry.
To keep you alive for
Exactly.
longer periods.
In a terrible state that
So you
no
can
one would
pack
really
more
want to
in.
live in.
You
Exactly.
pig.
That's right.
It's the money. You follow the money and you find it.
Yeah. Usually that's always the case, right?
Yes.
I mean,
And the reason they have to do all that to the bread is because by the time they got it on the truck to get it to the store, it would be molded. It would
Right.
be bad. It would be too stale to eat, something like that. And so for it to be a food-like substance, which is what I call most of what's in the store, to make it palatable, it has to have those things in it in order for it to stay palatable long enough for you to consume it.
gotcha.
And as the population began to accelerate, they had to have a higher yield on these crops, right? But it's gotten a bit out of control. As what I understand is if they could take as much land as available and revert everything back to organic crops, you would actually end up with a greater total yield.
There is a lot of new science saying that the old methods actually have higher yields,
Yeah,
especially as the monocropping continues and continues and continues to strip the land of everything that's good in it, and the land isn't good anymore, and it becomes a desert. It's called desertification.
right.
It's just no good.
Just strips everything natural out of the soil. Speaking of that, could we enter into a new period of a dust bowl?
Yes.
Like, and that was a very big thing, It was around the Depression age, wasn't it?
Yes.
So
in the early 1930s, late the 1930s and 40s.
Yep, they just turned up all the soil, this black gold, and the dust storms came in and kicked everything up into the high atmosphere, and people would actually die of suffocation just with their lungs being full of basically cement at that point. You could button up your windows and your doors, but these are tiny particulates that would stay in your lungs, and there's no way to get them out. So is there a very real danger of that right now, do you think?
I think that it's a lesser danger than a lot of other things, but yes, they are turning the world into a desert, and they're finding that by grazing animals on grass, that's reversing it. And so you can reverse it, and you can turn back the clock and turn it into useful land again.
So if you do reverse this process, basically what that means is, I think Monsanto, everybody has this idea that they're feeding the world, okay? Because, their seeds are what's populating everything. And I think that it's a bunch of bullshit, honestly. I think that it's just a profit. It's profit sourcing. And they're trying to sell their chemical more than their food.
Yes,
so you need to create this GMO product or wheat where it can withstand this poison that essentially kills anything in its path, right?
Yes.
So you have this this particular seed strain that's patented by Monsanto. So if anybody uses this, they're entitled to, their intellectual property, I guess.
Correct.
So if they are using this type of wheat and they're throwing down all this Roundup, which is glycogen. What is the name of Roundup? Glyphosate. Okay. So you're putting this in the ground, and now we hear that it's creating superbugs. Not necessarily bugs, but weed strains and things that are beginning to catch a resistance to this. Correct. Which means you got to pump more chemicals in the ground. You have to further engineer these plants. So at one point,
you just give up and go back to the stuff that works.
Right. And they claim that, it has a higher yield. They claim that it's, safe for you to eat, although there has been no independent studies done. Every study, that's been done by either Monsanto themselves or FDA, that seem to be in bed with them. It just doesn't seem like, people like you and smaller farming operations even have a chance. It's like, you hear about these horror stories all across the globe where people become dependent on the Monsanto product, and they keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper into debt, and they eventually, go bankrupt, or, Monsanto will come in and, sue a small farm, and they bring their army of attorneys, and how can anybody fight that,
Yeah, like the Indians that are committing suicide.
Yeah, exactly.
They commit suicide because their family doesn't have to pay off the debt if they die.
Right.
And so they commit suicide so that their family is no longer burdened with that debt. And it's extremely sad and extremely terrible that it's allowed to go on. Mm-hmm. And small farmers, there are several places now actually, trying to think of who it is. Someone just recently threw Monsanto out, said that they have a 30-year embargo, I think, on GM crops.
This is a country?
Do that. Yes.
Okay, I did read about that. Portugal?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's becoming more of a fear for European nations and South American countries. Even in Hawaii, they're marching very heavily to keep Monsanto out. They don't want GM crops simply for the reason that they don't know enough about it. And that's how we should have been treating this all along. That's how over the past 10 and 20 years, we should have been saying we need more studies, we need more information. Syngenta is another company similar to Monsanto, and right now they are actually facing legal action for covering up the deaths of cows that have eaten GM corn.
Covering up deaths?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes.
There a multinational company covering up deaths. This is outrageous.
Yeah, they hid the research and didn't allow it to come out, and now they're facing criminal charges for this. So it's serious business, and that's what it is it's business.
And most of the wheat that are in, and the corn products that are being fed to the the cattle and the animals, the pigs, for meat products that hit the shelves, they're all being fed by things that they weren't necessarily intended to eat.
That's correct.
Cows and pigs were originally they were free-ranging animals, and they were eating grasses and things like that.
Correct.
I've been told, and maybe you can verify this, if you take a cow that has been eating grass and you put him in a feed house where they just will feed him corn and grain, that will kill that cow within a few days, right? And they have to wean it off of grass and into the corn, so it doesn't have basically an anaphylactic shock on its body and reject everything.
Digestive systems are not built to process corn, so it basically has to be slowly forced into them. And when you go to a really good steakhouse now, even if you go to the website, it will tout that it is corn-fed beef. Because Americans are used to that now.
And they love the fat,
it pisses me off when I see that.
Yeah.
And it's
got
a different flavor.
You
it's
want
got
a
bland
grass-fed piece of meat.
Yeah.
It does have a lot of different flavor. And that's what we're used to now.
But you're not getting any of your omega-3s, any of these, we're
CLA.
Yeah.
The very beneficial fats.
These are all things that you're giving your children now.
Yes. Yeah. And when an animal is fed the diet that nature intended for it, it's a healthy animal. And it lasts a long time, and it produces more health in its body, the things that we need, the nutrients that we need, it gets from its food. And when it's fed something that nature does not intend, it gets fat and sick and like humans in America.
Right. Jeff, we were talking, this was a couple weeks ago. Both Jeff and I, we've dabbled in raw food. I've been a vegetarian now for a couple months, dabbled in that for many years. I used to consider myself a flexitarian, so where I would have meatless meals, and I do like to get a lot of my nutrition from plants. But I started looking at food as a fuel more than anything else than just something to shove in my mouth to taste good.
Right.
Once you turn on that paradigm, you look at food a lot differently. You look at what your kids are eating a lot differently, and then you start going to the grocery store and looking at what's in other people's carts a lot differently. So you start to realize piece by piece that this is a real fucking problem out here, because it's everywhere. Like you said, you can't even go to a supermarket and feed your kids.
Yeah, supermarkets are just dangerous. Even health food stores. Half of what is in the health food store is not healthy.
Yeah, you really have to be vigilant and educate yourself on what you're putting in your body, because you can't trust, General Mills to tell you that it's good for you, because half their products are sugar.
That's a good point, because I think a large portion of the population, surprisingly, older generations have this mindset that the country would never, they're taking care of us. They wouldn't feed us this poison. That's
not true.
So untrue.
Right. I think people have the tendency to trust, things that are put in place. This is a very basic essential. We're talking about food. It's
the FDA
next to water
would never
supply.
approve anything if it wasn't safe.
Right.
Only the FDA has a revolving door with Monsanto,
of course, and other multinationals or whatnot. You have some kind of FDA inspector that jumps over to Monsanto's marketing department, and then somebody from the marketing department jumps over to FDA. It's like, how is that even allowed? There's not a lot of transparency, and you're not going to get any goddamn coverage on the news media, So this is why I wanted to start something like this. I listened to podcasts for you, Jeff. You actually turned me on to Rogan, and then it just snowballed from there. But what podcasts I think have in common is you don't have to go through an editing process. You don't have to watch what you're saying. You can bring controversial ideas to the table and have a legitimate discussion. It's not suppressed. If you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to download it. So if you're out there and you're listening and you think this is shitty, I appreciate your opinion, but you don't have to listen. So
back to the your point about Monsanto and the government, there are some really good sites out there showing the connections. There's a lot of I think there's some Supreme Court justices that are former Monsanto employees.
Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas,
the head of the USDA or FDA, whoever they quoted, who they appointed the food czar.
Right.
He was a former Monsanto scientist, I believe.
They just passed this cockamamie law now where
Protection Act.
Yeah,
they're
it's a protection.
above the law now.
Yeah, you can't even litigate with them because they're basically above the law. So a lot of these ideas go against the very Constitution, that, life, liberty, pursuit of, happiness. And they're not giving the general public a chance for that.
No.
They're just, this is what you get, people. Good luck trying to find an alternative.
Yep.
Have fun. What if somebody can't establish a homestead like you? Look at the inner cities. I mean, what do they have? Matt, my brother, who's a regular co-host on the show, he lives downtown, and they're building a Whole Foods down there, but you can't even find a supermarket in the city of Detroit.
Mm-mm.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So you have gas stations.
You walk to your corner store.
Yeah, you walk to your
pick up
convenience
junk.
store. Yeah, and it's strictly junk food. So
And it's
what kind of
obvious.
nutrition is the next generation of humans going to have? They're going to have to be kept
None.
alive by big pharma. We
Yep.
talked about that earlier, but
Why
it's
is
just
one
it's a
in
scary thought.
1 in 3 Americans gets cancer now, and there's no surprise there.
Yeah, but
No.
that's not related to our product.
No, of course not. It's related to poisons in general, and GM foods are just another poison.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they see high fructose corn syrup, they see it as sugar. But the more research I look at that, it is an artificial sweetener. There's no getting around it. You pound corn down until it's something you can't even tell it's corn anymore. It turns into the syrup, and then you add it into your Coca-Cola in replace of cane sugar, beets, or whatever. But it's a total unnatural product.
Yeah, cane sugar is no gem either,
Right.
but it's 100 times better than artificial sweeteners or corn syrup.
What would you recommend for a natural sweetener, like honey?
Honey, raw honey,
Mhm.
not honey you'd buy at the supermarket, but raw honey and maple syrup are both mineral-rich, vitamin-rich sweeteners. You can stay away from agave. It's the same as high fructose corn
Hyped
syrup.
up, right?
Extremely processed. There are sugars that you like, sorghum, that you can find, but it's harder to do that.
Really,
Right.
all the ones we just named aren't reasonable for a typical family
No.
to use. They're not.
Cane sugar is non-GM, so it's a good alternative.
Gotcha. So a big thing of what I wanted to talk today about is, and you both have suffered, in your families about it, you and Jeff, food allergies. And this can be a very, very dangerous, thing for any family to deal with. Why don't you touch on what your kids are allergic to? Jeff, I know, at least one of your girls has a peanut allergy.
Yeah,
Pretty
I have,
severe. It used to be, at least, right?
Yeah, she hasn't had any exposure. She's almost 11. Her initial exposure, she was 10 months old. Put a little fingerful of peanut butter up on the roof of her mouth for her to try it, and she got all blotchy. Went to the emergency room. Nothing close to any anaphylaxis.
good.
So we carry EpiPens, and she, as far as we know, she hasn't had any exposure. So we don't know the severity. One doctor will tell you one more exposure will make her more sensitive to it. Others will say it'll desensitize her to it.
Right.
So you don't know what to believe, so you just avoid everything. But with GMOs and transgenic crops, she's very likely come across something that had a protein taken, put into some other plant, and she's had some exposure. So it's
I
kind
didn't
of a
even think about
crapshoot.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It becomes even more
So
dangerous.
your wheat is now maybe partially peanut.
Yeah, I was just
Okay.
reading there are
That's
there's
creepy.
a lot of crossover between soy and peanut. So they were doing some transgenic stuff, and the genes were hopping back and forth without them. It wasn't part of the process
Like
that
Jurassic
they knew
Park,
of.
life will find a way,
Something like
kind
that,
of
yeah.
thing. Right.
Yeah, so it's a crapshoot. And I was also reading the GMOs. They will attach to your gut lining and be absorbed and kind of become part of you. It's
Yes.
the latest thing I was reading.
It's sick, isn't it?
Wow. So what kind of allergies, Jessica, do your kids have?
Well, we have about 14 allergies between all of the children.
Wow.
The big ones are dairy, so cow's milk, soy, corn.
When you say dairy, is lactose?
No, it's not the sugar. The sugar is lactose. The
Okay.
protein is what they're allergic
Okay.
to. So the casein is what they're allergic to
Okay.
in milk. People who are lactose intolerant can't process the sugar in milk, and so they get gas and diarrhea and that sort of thing. People who are allergic to the protein in milk have very different reactions.
Okay.
So my kids get eczema, which is a painful, itchy skin. They get hyperactivity. They get mood changes. there are just so many reactions that I'm a firm believer that people who believe they don't have a food allergy just don't know it yet.
Right. Okay.
That there are food allergies in everyone, especially since the introduction of genetically modified crops.
Mm-hmm.
And when your body just doesn't recognize something as food, it attacks it like a virus. That's just, there's like two choices. There's an invader and something natural and normal that I should have in my body. And if it doesn't recognize it as natural and normal because it's not something it's ever seen before, it attacks it, and you become allergic to that food. So, yeah, my kids are allergic to garlic and onions and cinnamon and pears and legumes, so peas, beans, peanuts. That eliminates.
Where do they get their
whole
protein?
Group.
I mean,
From
it's a lot of protein,
meat.
right? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we get a lot of meat, really. We use a lot of meat. And they are still able to, like chia seeds are a pretty good source of protein. I don't know if you knew that as a vegetarian, but yes, they're a pretty good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Source of protein. They still are able to process tree nuts at this point. They've not shown any reaction to tree nuts, so they can get it from that, but definitely not soy, definitely not beans, and not peanuts, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But peanuts and tree nuts are not related. Peanuts and beans are related. They're legumes.
Oh, okay.
Now, what do you guys think the connection is between allergies and inflammatory conditions? Because that's the newest thing we're hearing about. Everybody's got some kind of inflammation. It seems to be extremely similar as far as some type of reaction, something immune-based.
I don't understand all the hype about inflammation, because inflammation is just yet another symptom of the root cause. They say inflammation causes heart disease. It's just another symptom that leads to heart disease. It's not the cause. The cause is things like allergies, things that are just your body's incapability of processing the food that it gets. Now, and I am a member of a group of women, moms, that have varied backgrounds, natural doctors and naturopathic doctors and herbologists and, a lot of alternative medicine, but they work with DAN doctors. That's the autistic group.
Defeat Autism Now.
They work with DAN doctors, and they work with all sorts of alternative practitioners to try to heal our kids' allergies. And basically, Dr. Kenneth Bach is a DAN doctor, and he coined the phrase the 4 A's, basically. So allergies, autism, ADHD, pardon me, and asthma are the 4 A's, and that they're all essentially the same disease. And that they're just different expressions of the same disease.
What disease is that?
There are a lot
modern society disease.
Yes, exactly. There are a lot of components, a lot of things like heavy metals and poisons, toxins.
You can't talk bad about that.
You're talking to a metalhead.
I'm so sorry. Dangerous heavy metals.
There we go.
Mercury.
Like Slayer?
There's the whole mercury in vaccinations debate, and lead poisoning can cause a lot of the same symptoms in all of these diseases.
Arsenic.
And arsenic, which is heavy in rice. And there are just, it's basically an inability to process the sheer quantity of poison that we're exposed to every day. And so they express this disease through these 4 A's, and it's just sad.
I actually had I had an inflammatory condition several years ago, immune-based, ended up being a form of colitis, and I had some blood testing done, and my holistic doctor immediately said, your heavy metals are going to come through the roof. You live in Detroit, manufacturing area, no doubt about it, and they were over the top.
Well, that's just you. I mean,
that's you too.
You absorb it through your ears.
It's you,
right?
Now, there's the process by which you remove heavy metals and toxins from your body.
Cremation?
No, it's called methylation. And it's a complex biochemical process that removes these things from your body. And if there's a breakdown at any point, then it doesn't work. And you're stuck with the toxins circulating through your blood system, and
just moves one spot to another,
exactly.
Right?
And
finds your weakest point and then sets up shop.
Your body tries to push it into organs to keep it out of your bloodstream so that it's not doing that, bouncing around. But like if you chlorophyll is a detoxer, so if you eat a lot of green vegetables, you're going to pull a lot of this out of your tissues, and then if the breakdown is still there, you're not able to eliminate it through your system, and so it just moves on to the next tissue, next organ.
That's wild. That's a frightening concept.
Yes.
To where it's just moving around.
Yep.
You can't really lock it down. It's in your kidney one day, maybe in your liver the next, and you're living your whole life. We're all in our 30s here,
Whoa.
and whoa.
Speak for
Some of us
yourself,
on our
right?
higher end of the 30s.
I got a few months past that.
So, but we're all relatively young. And we're not experiencing these gigantic effects of cumulative, products that are in our bodies yet. But the longer we take a look at what we're eating and not give a shit about what we're putting on our body, it's gonna add up.
Well,
there's
and it adds
no
up
way
in
around
each
it.
generation that is done too. They did a study. It's called the Pottinger cat study. They took cats and fed them processed food, and the next generation was sicker than the first, and the following generation was sicker than that one, until they got to a point, I think it was 3 or 4 generations down, where the kittens didn't live out of kittenhood. They became sterile. They couldn't have babies anymore. They couldn't live. They would develop cancer when they were still babies, and they just all died.
So it's probably bad for business, if they're killing off everybody. So I think their goal is to keep us just alive enough to where we can still be consumers.
Exactly.
And
the true zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And when you say we're somewhat young and haven't felt the effects yet, I disagree. I think that was a big part of what the breakdown of
True.
my system
Yeah.
was. That's exactly what it was.
Okay.
And that's why 1 in 3
Yeah.
30-somethings is now being diagnosed with
Yeah.
cancer.
I mean, I guess I've been through a couple things too, inflammatory issues. Nothing that's been diagnosed, but something clearly was wrong, and I try and flood my body with good material at that point. It's actually when I got off meat for a while. Like I said, I had dabbled with it for some time, but it's when you're eating meat, you don't know what you're getting, at the store really. I mean,
Yep.
I can go down to Cattleman's, where you can get the grass-fed beef or across the parking lot here, but again, you're going to pay for it, which is,
Oh, yeah.
maybe you should have to, because what you're paying for is the lack of the environmental damage that's happening. You're paying for healthy material to go into the cattle or whatever kind of meat you're eating. How often do you go through animals? Do you raise all your animals for feed, some for just milk? How do you guys manage your meat intake?
Well, we just bought our house last August,
Mhm.
so we haven't actually gotten to the point where we've butchered anything yet.
That's going to be hard for your kids, isn't it?
Is.
Yeah.
We did warn them beforehand. We
Right.
said, these are the parents. These are the ones we're going to keep. So go ahead and get attached to these. They're their pets. They're out there. They're allergic to dogs, so we can't
Okay.
have dogs. And they're out there playing with those goats and petting those goats and laying in the dirt with
I
them
would be
and
too.
stuff, just like dogs, every day.
Can't
And
you
they just
warm them
love
up?
them.
Isn't there some kind of slaughterhouse Xbox game that you can get them warmed up?
Desensitized?
Yeah.
Well, my 11-year-old has had to put a couple of things out of their misery already, a chicken and a rabbit. So
Okay.
he is quite good at it and really is methodical with it. He's not a killer,
Right.
but he understands that he's doing what's best for this animal, or he's
Yet.
doing what's best for himself. And so he treats it with an attitude like ancient Native Americans, where they
Respect.
give thanks for what this animal is doing for me, and then does what he needs to do.
Mhm.
And so they understand that the babies are going to be food, and that they are not to get attached, and they are not to name them, and they've already named the piglets. So
Yeah, of course.
It's gonna happen, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be a little hard, but I have at this point put the piglets up on the website for sale, and if they go, in order for us to be able to afford the higher price of the feed for all the other animals, then that's okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
If we don't actually eat the pigs, then
So this will
we'll
become
eat the next
this
ones.
will become a trend where you're selling every animal that's been named.
Right. Well, then I said, the girls, we won't eat too much. So, pick your favorite girl and you can name that one, that kind of thing.
Right. So what is the diet of your animals when they're on site?
It depends on the animal, because everybody needs a little bit different things, but everybody is eating grass. So we do a managed rotational grazing, or called mob grazing, where you put them on one small piece of land for a day or two or a week, where they will mow all that grass down for you, and then you move them to the next section. So if you put all of the animals together, they all work together in the same way that companion planting can work for growing a garden. And you have the goats out there grazing, pooping, the pigs pooping, the chickens go behind them the next day or 2 days later and eat the fly larvae that's now hatching in the poop. That keeps the fly population down and feeds the chickens.
Got your own little ecosystem happening out there.
And that's
great.
how nature intends it.
Yeah.
And so with managed rotational grazing, they get the grass that they need. And then because we have bred the goats, for instance, because humans have bred the goats to have optimal milk output, if you really want that optimal milk output, you do have to put a little extra nutrition into them. So we do feed them a little bit of grain while they're milking, just for the same reason that humans need 500 extra calories when they're nursing. So we give them some barley, some omega-3s in the form of flax or chia. We give the chickens coconut for their main protein source, because they can't have corn or soy, because the corn and soy make it into the eggs, which makes it into my children, which is no good.
Which causes reactions.
Correct.
Right.
And so the same with the milk in the goats. It makes it through their milk the same way it did when I would eat it when they were nursing.
That's something I wanted to bring up, because
Okay.
I was reading a little bit about that on either your website or one of your blog posts or something of that matter. But talk about when you were nursing and what was going on, inside your house, and just take us through a day of your nightmares, I guess.
Well, it started with my first. He's now 11 years old, and by the time he was 4 or 5 months old, he would never sleep for more than 15 minutes at a time. And even at night, he would sleep for about an hour. So I was up 8 times before I would go to work the next day, and I was a zombie. I couldn't think, couldn't do anything correctly. He screamed a lot, cried a lot, needed to be held almost all the time. By the time he was 4 or 5 months, he had bloody stools. They were green and frothy, and he was bleeding. And I just had it at that point. I had been told that his slow weight gain and slow growth were normal, that he was just colicky and that's normal, that his skin being constantly broken out and breaking and his constant diaper rash, all that's normal. And just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal.
Yeah, your mom bells went off and realized it was
Yes.
bullshit.
Yeah,
So these are
time I
conventional
had-
doctors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, his
Multiple doctors, I'm
pediatrician at
guessing.
that point. Yes, actually 2 or 3 different doctors at his pediatric office had told me this. And at this point, I was just like, no way. So I went to the internet, and I had already been a member of online communities for a while regarding pregnancy and babies and that kind of thing. And I went to the breastfeeding boards, and I said, something's wrong. And that's when one of the moderators told me, it sounds like you have food allergies. And up to that point, I had only known food allergies to be, tightening of the throat and needing to go to the hospital because you were about to die, the anaphylactic reactions. And I had no idea that symptoms like these could be because of food allergies. So it was at that point that I really started looking into it and what you could do for it. And at that point, 11 years ago, it was basically eliminate the allergens. That's about all you could do. So I thought removing dairy from my diet was the hardest thing I had ever had to do. And then when I had my second child, she was allergic to dairy and soy. So that was even harder because I had basically replaced all the dairy things with the soy alternatives that they had at the health food store.
Do you or your husband suffer from these type of allergies?
Well, through diagnosing my children from these things, I have realized that
Very mild reactions?
yes,
Okay.
the reactions that I had had over the years must have been food related too. And my sister and my husband, he was not breastfed. He was fed formula, and he had very bad reactions, had to be moved to soy formula. Well, of course, that tells me that he had a dairy allergy.
Okay.
and I was nursed, but I would get sick and throw up when I had milk, and so that's dairy allergy right there. And my sister, like, she would get crazy, my mom would say, just crazy and super angry every time she'd have bananas. So she wasn't allowed to have bananas. You know, so these were things
Crazed ape.
Yeah, they didn't call them food allergies back then. You know, they didn't know that they were food allergies back then. But
lose your minditis.
Right.
Right.
So they've been around. They've been here for a long time. It's just they've been reclassified now, and people understand more that the little things like ADHD are really caused by food allergies, food reactions.
How old is your firstborn then?
Yes,
11?
he is 11 now.
He's 11 now. So that
Yes.
goes to show the level of education even back. We're only talking 10 years ago.
Right.
And they introduced bovine growth hormone about 20 years ago in 93. And no one noticed that maladies were skyrocketing. Another Monsanto product, by the way.
Right.
It was originally called Posilac, I think.
Yeah. That was after they created Agent Orange, right?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think they were involved in the
Yeah.
aspartame thing, too. That's an excellent
Yes,
one.
they
Well, they're
were.
actually talking about adding aspartame to all milk products they're going to hit the shelf.
I say may as well at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's got everything
It won't
else.
go in my
packed full of
kids.
everything else. You know, a gallon of organic milk. I don't really drink milk anymore. I do like a coconut milk or almond milk or something like that. Just because, again, I kind of been educating myself and I realize what's in this crap, so my kids have got to have, some of these things. And if I pull everything away from them, I'm the tyrant. So,
Right.
and that's difficult too. I can imagine what you're going through because, all your kids, they, are they homeschooled or do they go
Yes.
to, they are homeschooled?
I do homeschool them,
Okay.
and their food allergies were one of the things that made me decide to
It's
homeschool
a scary
them.
thing sending them off every day. You don't know what their environment is,
I knew at that point that I had to make the decision between homeschool and school that, school food was junk. But I was beginning at that point to really understand the food allergies and how much they could be exposed to that I would have no knowledge of and no control over. And I just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, how's your daughter deal with peanut butter in the classroom?
It became more and more of a problem every grade. She's in 5th grade now, and she had a couple kids in the same class with her, so I don't want to say they were isolated. They had their own table, and it's grown. Now there's so many. I don't know if it was officially done, but they might be a peanut-free school now, as far as the lunchroom.
And isn't
So
it crazy?
it
that
pisses some
incredible.
people off, but what are you going to do?
Well, yeah. You hear it, all the time. Like, well, it's just a couple kids. We can't adjust everything, and you can. It's a simple
The
thing.
life of kids.
There's some things that you got to pull out.
Right.
If it's going to kill a child, that's a big deal.
Right,
You
when
have to be able to send your kid to school knowing that they're going to come home okay.
When you're the parent and somebody says it's just a couple kids, basically they're saying just kill those couple kids.
Right. Yeah, it's just Darwinism. Survival of the fittest, baby.
That's right.
I just read a statement by an allergy mom a little while ago, a couple of weeks ago, that said something like, it's knowing that your child is always playing on the edge of a precipice and you can't do anything to pull them back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's very difficult.
So after you kind of diagnosed the allergies that were going on in the house, how did you take steps to go on a healthier path for everybody?
Well, once I realized the severity of the problem, I am a researcher. I'm someone who has to find a reason, has to find the core of everything. And so I started looking. I started looking on the internet. I started asking questions. And while true, you can't believe everything on the internet, there is a wealth of information out there. And there are lots of other people on the same path that I am on and looking for what's causing this and what can we do to fix it. And so I started just talking to other people, getting involved with these other moms who are working with doctors who are on the cusp, on the edge, and really doing something rather than just accepting what's out there already and really experimenting. And there's a field of medicine called orthomolecular medicine.
Why don't you explain what that is?
Yes, that's Linus Pauling was really like the coiner of the phrase, and he was a doctor, in the middle part of the century, 20th century, and he strongly believed that with good nutrition and the optimal levels of certain vitamins, you could change anything. So you could cure anything, you could fix anything. Your body just needs the optimal levels of everything that it needs in nature in order to fix itself. And so using vitamins, minerals, herbs,
Raw foods.
yes, those things can heal you. And so I've been on that path for quite some time. Weston A. Price was a doctor. He was actually a dentist in the early part of the 20th century also. And the American Dental Association, what it was at the time, I can't remember what they called themselves, but they asked him to do studies of most of the world's populations, the remote populations that haven't been touched by Western diets yet.
Let me guess, they were pretty healthy.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
And their neighboring, like, there would be places in the Swiss Alps where just over the mountain there was a very, very healthy, very longevity-filled area. And then just on this side of the mountain where
McDonald's,
they had...
Burger King.
yeah, no McDonald's, yeah, but white sugar, for instance.
Right.
And they would have malformed faces. They would have, it wasn't a wide, like, we're supposed to be able to have our wisdom teeth in our mouth. The fact that we can't in Western society is a result of our diet. And if we were to receive an optimal diet full of the minerals that we need, then our faces would be wide enough to accommodate our wisdom teeth, for instance.
I like the analogy of the wider seats on Disney rides better. They had to expand all the rides because of fat Americans.
That's for real?
Well, yeah.
That was true.
Wow.
They really did that.
Or at least something. Some rides.
Sounds like a trip to Walmart.
So the traditional foods is what that's called, and we follow traditional food eating in our house. So
Okay.
we
So,
use,
so the orthomolecular
broths.
theory of the optimum levels,
yes,
that makes sense to me until something that was yet unintroduced becomes introduced, like genetically modified, that wasn't part of the plant.
exactly.
So that
You
no
have
longer
half
applies.
animal, you have animal genes spliced into
Right.
plants. So you're essentially mixing flora and fauna in the same organism. I mean, how do you even classify that? I mean, the bulk of it, yeah, of course, is plant. It is a wheat stalk that's growing out of the ground, but you know what? It has
It's not right.
it has a piece of frog in it because the frog is resistant to glycogen. Is glycogen?
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate. Sorry about that,
That's
everyone.
all right.
This is going back probably about a year ago now. I was having some health problems, inflammatory issues like we were talking about. And I had a Netflix account at the time, and I ran across a film called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. Are you guys familiar with that?
It's in my queue, but I haven't watched
I
it.
tell you, it changed my life, really. It actually did. There is about a story about a guy in Australia. He's a business executive and loved to excess, just like Americans do. Loved to drink, loved to stuff his face in Vegas, and eventually he started to get an autoimmune disorder. So he had an idea to, instead of running away from nature, is to run full force to nature. So he eliminated all foods and just strictly went on raw juices, fruits and vegetable juices only. And I think he did this for, months at a time, initially. And it changed his life. He dropped a bunch of weight. His autoimmune disorder disappeared. He started feeling great. He had energy to play with his kids again. And so he did a film about it. And he followed a guy who, just regular American trucker, driving I-80 coast to coast.
Mm.
Guy was like 425 pounds or something. And, he reached out to him and says, look, I need a life change. And he juiced for like an entire year, and he's down to like, 200 pounds. He's on, circuit tours on talks and things like that. Love to have him on the podcast too, But I immediately, about halfway through the film, I says, I got to do this. If nothing else, I like a challenge every once in a while in my life,
Right.
So let me see if I can not eat food for 10 days.
Jason does get a little crazy.
I do take things on edge sometimes.
I'm getting
Yeah. So when I did this, the first few days were brutal. I was like detoxing hardcore, all these, everything's pouring out of me. and I started to feel better. My hunger disappeared probably after day 4, and our other co-host, Toby, he's doing his own juice fast right now. I think he's doing a 30-day. I talked to him, and he's been to a couple family get-togethers with pizza and things like that, and he's been able to stay strong. He's done it before, so I have all faith in you, Toby, out there when you're listening here, that you'll be able to make it through. So next time we get together, I want to see exactly how it went for him. But I know he's probably lost. I talked to him today. It was 10 or 15 pounds he's lost in maybe a week. I lost in 10 days. I did lose 20 pounds.
It goes fast.
Yeah.
We've done a couple of those. We've done a couple of raw food detoxes, but I've only made it. I think we've done 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
But you feel different within the 3rd day. Your hunger starts to go away. But it's no fun. And we've talked about it. Takes us back to the addiction component.
Yeah, there are people who do that with raw milk too, and it really does do some beneficial things for you.
Raw milk, that is illegal,
Yes.
from what I'm being told.
Yes, it
you
is.
cannot sell raw milk because it is bad for you. It's not pasteurized, and
Right.
it's nutrient deficient.
Mm-hmm. Not at all.
There's a threat of
It's just
bacteria.
a bunch of bullshit out there, man. It's a smoke screen so you can buy their fucking product.
Exactly.
That's what's going on. I mean, I think more and more people are waking up to that, but I'm amazed at some of the people I talk to, and they're just completely clueless on what's going on out there, and
Yep.
a lot of them really don't give a shit.
No,
They're like,
it takes too much
well,
work.
it tastes fucking good,
Right.
and a food is food.
I feel fine.
I feel
I ate
great.
a big piece of meat and shit, and I'm all right.
Yep.
Look at me. I'm fine.
Well, this is another reason why I'm doing this, just to kind of create some kind of awareness out there. We had a huge response last week. We had on Alexander Ward. We had hundreds and hundreds of downloads, and for our 3rd episode, I was shocked by it. Maps, they gave us a big shout out. We have an interview with them in June. So I hope that everybody who tuned in last week is tuning in today.
Me too.
Looks like we're right about an hour here. I wanted to give you an opportunity to go over your website. I know that you are taking up donations for your legal fund. You're almost all the way there, it seems like,
Yes.
at least for the starting point anyways.
Right.
So why don't you go over what your website is, where people can find you.
We are at sweetpeasfarm.webs.com.
Okay.
So it's Sweet Peas, Peas.
And you have a Facebook page?
Yes, that's Sweet Peas Farm and Rabbitry, RABBITRY.
Okay.
And I have been updating all of our followers. We have tons of new followers since this all began, updating them on the Facebook page, and we're taking the donations on our website for our legal fund, which goes to our legal defense against the township, just for raising our animals. We've been trying to work with them up until this point, and every time I go in with whatever they've asked me for, they come back with, "Oh no, that's not right. You need something else." And so
You're fighting City Hall.
yes,
Yeah.
essentially. And we're taking donations for the legal fund. The Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund has agreed at this point to represent us, and they are taking on the township attorneys at this point, trying to avoid a court battle. But I don't think that's going to happen.
And we were talking earlier, you said that they've had many successful cases
Yes.
that are similar to yours, right?
Yes.
Zoning violations? Or...
Yes, the Buchlers up in Marquette actually just had this same case. They were zoned residential. They had 6 sheep and 50 chickens, and the township came down on them, and they claimed right to farm protection, and they won. And there are many other cases that the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund does that are raw milk sales, or somebody had a zoning violation for an Amish farmer for a barn he built when his old one was destroyed, and that just got dismissed, and the Legal Defense Fund represented him in that. So they've done many things like this before. They've done this exact same case up north a couple of months ago, and they are happy to take us on, and I love that.
That's great. I wish you the best of luck. Your donations on your website, is that done right through PayPal?
Yes.
Okay. So it's easy for somebody to put a credit card in or something like
Yes.
that.
So what Jessica needs is enough momentum, attention, exposure for them to just back off. That's
Yes.
because she wants to avoid what's coming.
Yeah,
Right.
I was on another podcast, and I had 65,000 listeners, and they got going on the letters, and they just inundated the township with letters, and it has done nothing to this point, but they also donated, and the donations got us the lawyer, and the lawyer is going to get us a win here. So
you do have some momentum.
yes, and we
Good.
want to keep it going.
Yeah, that's I read about you on Huffington Post, and then
Awesome.
it showed, I moved over to Lansing State Journal, and the Free Press had something on you as well. And right away I'm like, wow, this is kind of right up our alley, and love to sit down and talk to you. And it seems like you're very well versed on all this, and I think you probably have to when your family's involved.
I take
especially
charge
when you
and
have these,
take care of my kids.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, today we are sponsored by books. I know that we still haven't sold out. So last week I think it was water. This week we're going with books. But seriously, educate yourself the most you can. Use the internet, use books, use any resource you have to dig up the truth. Don't take everything that corporate media tells you at their word, because they really don't have the best interest at heart. So we're just trying to throw out some ideas here. I'm hoping that everybody got something out of this podcast today. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you guys want to support the IGC, you can find us on our website at intellectualgentlemansclub.com. You can find us on Facebook. We are on Twitter at IGCcast. You can send me an email at igccast@gmail.com if you want to discuss anything. But you can jump on the website or Facebook and just share in the discussions there. What else we got? We have a Amazon link on our website. If you have anything in your wish list that you want to buy, you can just click right through our link. It costs you nothing extra. It comes out of Amazon's pocket, so it works for everybody. Just pay the light bills and things like that. Share this podcast, please. I'd like to keep this momentum going on our end as well. I implore you to, if you're going to make a donation this week, don't make it to me, make it to Sweet Pea Farm. I would like to see them have a successful case here in fighting the man. So, outside of that, I just wanted to say thanks for everybody. Our music today again was brought by Secrets. Jeff, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. You need a little bit more metal on the intro and the outro.
Oh, well, I'll take that under consideration.
All right.
Maybe I'll talk to Dave Mustaine and see if he can license his music for us for a specific episode.
He's hooking up with Willie Nelson, and I just saw an article.
Now you're talking. Now you're talking. Are you sure Willie's not going to calm him down a little bit?
No. Yeah, the heroin calmed him down.
All right, guys. Well, again, appreciate everybody out there, and we're signing off. Hang loose out there, guys.